Hey folks, David here, bringing back one of an oldie but a goodie. Recorded this one with Emily Isbell shortly after the publication of her book last year. But she's just a wealth of knowledge, has a bunch of great experience in the home care space as an operator, as a caregiver, has one of my favorite stories that have been told on this podcast. So enjoy this re-release. Hopefully it's new to most of you, but if you've heard it before, it's definitely worth giving it a listen again. See you guys on the next episode. We'll have some new ones starting next week.
It's about making right, not being right. I don't know if I'm wanting to remember it that way, but I do know that that was my action.
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. I'm David Knack, head of sales here at Zengage, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who've built amazing businesses and are super well respected. So I thought it'd be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of the biggest mistakes that they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business. Today with me on Home Care Hindsight, I'm joined by Emily Isbell. Emily, you are founder of EI and Company. First of all, thank you so much for coming on the show. But for people who don't know you, how would you introduce yourself?
Ooh, I can really get long-winded, but first I need to say that, David, I'm super excited to be here. If there's anyone to do a podcast with, it's you. You're going to make this fun, and so I can't wait to dig in. But as far as about me, I worked at a franchise, specifically Home Instead, started when I was a caregiver at 19 and worked my way up to the point of working with the owner to expand to 7 locations. And by the end of that, we were serving 1 million hours of care across 3 different states. I was not the entrepreneur, he was, and I was the boots on the grounds operations and creating the structure to make that possible. And he always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. He knew I wanted to be an owner, really, is where it started. But instead, we decided to work together in the fashion that we did, and it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for both of us. But 2020 happened, and I realized that my entrepreneurial story may not happen if I don't act on it sooner than later. And so I took some time off in 2021, started this business, EI and Company, and now today we have a team of over 8. I'm losing count. We keep growing so fast, but over 8 that support in consulting for operations of home care, both franchisors, franchisees, or independent home cares. So that's a long-winded but still shorter story about me. And the latest thing that has come to the surface is that my book was released called The 24/7 Solution, Proven Strategies for Home Care Business Leaders. So that's another part of my history and story.
Great. And you left out a detail about the book, Emily. What are you now?
I'm an author. Is that what you mean?
A best-selling author. The book was a bestseller. Look, you're terrible at plugging yourself. I'm bad at plugging myself. I think that's something we both have in common. But we were very proud to see the success of that book. And if you haven't checked it out already, it's a great book. It's got a lot of very tactical tips. There's also a lot of bonus resources that people can take the stuff in the book and use the templates that you've designed and provide those kinds of things. So people should check it out. What I think is really interesting, we got to know each other earlier this year when we were both expecting little babies to come into the world. And our due dates of our little babies were both May 19th of this year. Now, my daughter was punctual and showed up right on her due date. I guess your son showed up a couple of days before.
That's right, May 16th. A little bit early.
Yeah. I remember this is, we bought, it was right after we found out we were pregnant. This is our first. I know this is your second. Not that that means I like my child more than you like your child. However, it was our first, we just found out we were pregnant. We were in Zion National Park and we bought this onesie and it was the smallest one they had in any of the gift stores. And I was like, it was like a 3 to 6 month onesie. And I was like, she's never going to be this big. Like, when is she ever going to wear this? And she is now like about to bust out of the seams on it. And so it was just, they grow up fast, Emily.
They definitely do. I have to make note. You were in Zion within the last 12 months, obviously, if you had just found out.
Yeah.
I was in Zion National Park and within the last 12 months as well. So that's another weird coincidence.
October 2023.
It was more recent than that for me, but nonetheless.
Cool. If we were had walked past each other on the hiking trail before we'd met, that would have been extremely weird.
Definitely.
Okay. As you know, I get tired of small talk quickly. And what I really want to ask is, what kind of person are you? Now, I will say this, you're the kind of person that I can ask, what kind of person are you, in polite company, and you'll just take that in stride. However, I get to do that a lot on my podcast. And so in order to ask the question, what kind of person are you? If you could go back in time and choose a different career path, what would that career path be?
So I love this question. Actually, my team member recently asked the same question of me, and it didn't take long for me to answer it. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. So I love that you asked it. I was a competitive gymnast, and I did that for 9 years. And I think it's very important to say, even though it was 9 years of being a competitive gymnast, it doesn't mean I was really good at it. It just means I was really committed to trying hard and trying to be really good at it. But nonetheless, I fell in love with the sport, loved the sport. And when I was in 8th grade, I ended up shifting gears and joining the basketball team, a complete shift. Usually people become cheerleaders. To answer your question, though, I always thought then, and even up until college, that I wanted to own a gym and create an environment for people to love the sport. I was in a smaller town, not a small town, but a smaller town, and it didn't have a gym for a long time. And so my parents were driving me an hour 4 times a week to 4-hour practices. So 6 times 4, that's 24 hours a week. My parents were dedicated to me being at the gym, not being an elite gymnast who was about to go to the Olympics. So there was a part of me that saw a need and wanted to do that. But yeah, that would be my career path. I would love, it's still entrepreneurial. So I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
No matter what, it was still entrepreneurial. I just love the opportunity it gives people to become both better at improving themselves, but also being a part of a team.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, great. Well, you have accomplished a lot of things. In your intro, took us through a quick overview of all the different things that you've done. And one of the things I like about the show is I get to have people on who've done a lot of impressive things in their career and who've accomplished a lot, but we're not going to talk about any of that. Instead, what we're going to talk about today is a big mistake that you made, and because I think we learn a lot from our mistakes. I think if we don't learn a lot from our mistakes, we're paying a whole lot and getting nothing in return. I had a friend of mine who I was calling him because I had some questions about the wiring in my old house. And he said to me, David, you know what you're doing right now? And I was like, what? He said, you're learning. And learning is always expensive. So, Emily, tell us about the big mistake that you've made.
Ooh. So I don't like to think about mistakes, if I'm being quite frank. It doesn't mean I don't want to learn from them, but I have enough cringe moments where I remember things from middle school and high school that I don't want to cringe any more than I already do on those memories. So here, I think the way I approach mistakes, I can rattle off a few. It doesn't mean I completely have amnesia about them, but the way I look at mistakes is to try to create systems so that I trust the system and improve upon it, and I never have to think about that mistake again. And I trust that system fully and know that I created it for a reason. But if I'm going to peel back and try to find those mistakes, I think I want to start, since it is unique that I was a caregiver to start with, and do what I do today and built what I had built. This one's an embarrassing one. I don't admit this in a lot of settings. So to put it on public podcast for it to be permanently out in the ethos makes me very nervous, but hey, what the heck. I was a caregiver. I was 20 at this point. It was later. I was a caregiver for a year and a half and had a bad have I was a college student and I enjoyed coffee and cigarettes and fell into that trap. So that's the embarrassing thing. I never really have been a smoker. No longer. Don't recommend it. 0 out of 5 stars. So with that story, though, I was working overnights with a client in a facility, a very fancy facility, a continuum of care. So they had independent and skilled and memory care and everything. I didn't know this. I was a caregiver. I was working to provide care to the client, but they were one of our higher referral sources for the company I was with. And the client I had, we'll call her Miss P, she had Alzheimer's and I needed 24/7 around the clock care. She was in the independent part. I was there for nighttime and I needed to stay up all night. And people who do this understand that can be challenging. It's hard for caregivers to stay awake with a one-on-one client who's right there sleeping in another room. They're not awake, but their Alzheimer's is a risk for them to having fall or wandering. She loved to wander. She liked to have yard sales at 3 a.m. So all that aside, I was trying to stay awake. And so I could go with a baby monitor outside her door, which was right down go outside right next to her apartment. And I would smoke to stay awake. So very embarrassing, bad habit, not recommending it. And I left one morning shortly after getting promoted into the office. So I was in my in-between of being promoted into the office. I accepted the role and was excited to start. And I had left about, it's embarrassing, but like 12 cigarette butts. And I had planned to throw them away. However, I don't remember, but something happened. But they were just sitting there, just nasty collection of cigarette butts outside of their very beautiful, well-kept landscape. And they called and reported it and was very unhappy with this caregiver who was there in the middle of the night smoking all night. So that was a big mistake. That was embarrassing. I had just gotten a promotion and just quickly been told why they made a mistake to promote me. And the owner of the company called me to say, did this really happen? Was this you?
I have a question. Did you have like a portable ashtray you brought around with you, or did you just kind of have like a little spot on the ground where you put all 12 of your cigarette butts?
Yeah, just on the ground, right next to the bench, just nice and tacky.
Oh no! Who from the office answered that call about the cigarettes?
I think the scheduler did, but she quickly got it to the owner because it was such a high referral source to the business.
Yeah.
And then I was called by the owner.
I think in my perfect world, if we're making the movie about this, you're the one who answers the phone call.
True. You know?
Like you've been promoted into the office, and oh man, wow, that is, Emily, that's a tremendous mistake. So actionably, what'd you learn from that?
Yeah. So here's what I'm proud of. What I learned from it, there's lots to say I learned from it, but I think I'd rather answer what I'm proud of, because I can look back and be proud of, I can plug myself of the past, not so much of the present.
Sure.
And so I'm 20 years old. I'm just received this promotion, and my immediate reaction when the owner called was, who can I call? I am so sorry.
Yeah.
And so the fact that I responded that way makes me so proud that I didn't say, oh, that wasn't me or anything. Like, I just said, who can I apologize to? Because immediately I realized I had forgotten. It wasn't intentional. I didn't do it to be tacky. I knew I was embarrassed to be a smoker. I hid that. I mean, nobody at the office knew I smoked, and this was the exception to try to keep me up at this night shift where she kept wanted the air conditioning at the lowest or at the highest possible in the summertime. So I think that, and then if I do answer, what did I learn from it? I guess I will say my reaction I learned was the right reaction. So to own my mistake, to apologize immediately. And I mean, I think I say this a lot today, and I'm starting, I don't know if I've, created this memory or embellished the memory in my mind, but I do think I even might have said the words like, how can I make right? What can I do to make right with that facility? Because that's not okay. And today I tend to say it's about making right, not being right. And so I don't know if I'm wanting to remember it that way, but I do know that was my action. I wanted to call the facility right away, and I was given the number to call. So I did.
Yeah. I really like that of it's not about doing right, it's about making right, because there's just so many things that can take place in a business that has as many people in it as home care businesses do. There's a lot of areas where accidents, mistakes, missteps can enter the business. And so you're not going to be perfect. But the question is, when those things happen, how are you going to respond?
So you took a different spin on it by saying doing right versus making right. And I love that. What I usually mean when I talk about it is we so often, when we get somebody frustrated with us in front of us, that whether this is our spouse or children or at work, that we want to be right. And it's like, it's just not worth that. Just how can you make right? And doing more of a seek to understand. But I like that too. You're right. There's always going to be errors. So it's having grace with yourself and making right when the errors come.
Yeah, no, I like your spin on it too. The perception is the thing that you've got to address and solve for. It doesn't matter if you you can do 30 minutes of backstory to explain why their perception's incorrect, and they're going to be way more frustrated than if you just agreed with them that, hey, you're right. How do we move forward from here?
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. And you teased for me that maybe you had more than one mistake. Is that correct?
I definitely have.
We can get a 2-for-1 here.
Yeah, I'll give this one, but I'll keep it short. So I've been recently promoted into the office, and we decide to do a cookout that I'm responsible for the caregivers. And it's my job. So I've done a really great job in terms of inviting and getting the word out. We had at the point probably 150 caregivers, and you're never going to get 150 caregivers to show up because some of them are working when you host an event, one of the challenges of home care. And nonetheless, though, I organized it to be at a time that I hoped many could show. And I think we had 30 RSVP at a park in the central area of our territory. And I went grocery shopping. Let's say it was going to be at 1 o'clock. I don't remember the details, but I know I went grocery shopping about hour and a half before. And so I show up late with groceries because I completely underestimated. I had never planned a cookout where we provided all the food for that many people, plus the administrative team. And so I'm last there while everybody's just standing around waiting for this cookout to start. And yeah, it's pretty embarrassing. One of the people that worked with me actually came and saved me. I called her and said, I don't know what I'm doing, actually. I've done a great job planning getting people here, but I have no idea how to plan the rest of this. And it was a joke later on that somebody couldn't reach her, and they said, what were you doing? She was like, saving Emily's job. And that's true.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, I think, man, that's such a relatable story. I know how it feels to be doing the prep work, and you're like, I know how long it takes to get groceries for 40 people. And then you're doing it and you see the time slipping away and you're like, I'm not going to make it in time. This is not good.
I've learned a lot from that one.
Yeah. Do you have any specific takeaways for the people here?
I think for me, the big thing that I learned is A to Z planning. And so I really, and having contingency plans. So from that point forward, it's actually kind of funny. The following year, we had a cookout because that was becoming a tradition. And I had a dunk booth. I had face painting. And because it was invite your family too. It wasn't just caregivers, it was caregivers and family. We had a lot of different events, and I even created like a blueprint. I went to the cookout site. I figured out where the dunk booth would be. I told office staff their position and what they were supposed to do and when they were managing the dunk booth. I got a little bit to the extreme on the other side, but nonetheless, it ended up being a hit, and I did not show up late. So
I love that. Okay, great. So we are going to move into our next segment here, which is there are things that people maybe don't value as highly as you think they should in this industry. And those things tend to be underrated. And so what's something that, in your opinion, home care owners are not valuing as highly as they ought to, and you think it's something that's totally underrated?
I think my answer might frustrate some because it's not as tactical. And I do tend to be tactical. So I'm glad you made that plug about the book, because it really was my effort to try to give you something to apply in your business. But I think, in short, what's underrated, and this is probably in all business, but I see it so much with clients and within the home care industry. And it's the concept of just executing consistently without fail. And so it's 5 words, and I think it's all 5 that matter. So executing consistently, and then the without fail. And the without fail does not mean perfection. It's just kind of reiterating consistently and reiterating that you execute regardless. So I often say with clients, this is kind of a different idea, but the idea of you got to start somewhere. And so it's executing, right? You got to just execute. So I get frustrated seeing people have these grand ideas, but then they never get it past the first meeting about it. And their teams are getting frustrated with them for that, as the owner or the leader. I think what's underrated is the fact that you make a decision and you stick to it for at least a period of time. And that doesn't need to be 5 years. And I think so I'm almost talking out of both sides of my mouth for a second, because it's like I want you to execute consistently without fail, but then I think you have to have a balance of understanding this means for at least 6 months, at least 12 months, and not be so daunted about, well, if I do this, I've got to do it forever. I think that's the problem and why people don't do it sometimes. And then the other side of it is it's shiny object syndrome, and it sounded really good, but now we're facing a different issue. And so that's no longer our problem, and we completely forget about it. And I think that ties back to what I said before about systems and me cringing over mistakes. I don't like to think about the mistake that I made to create the system, but I trust that system. I have ultimate faith in the system I created, and there was a reason I did that. And so that system is me consistently executing. So I said a lot and went a lot of different directions, more than I expected to, but I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I think that's really one of the things that I think is difficult to think about is, can I do this for 5 years? Can I do this for 10 years? And it's what I'm hearing you say is, can I do this for 3 months consistently? Because there's no silver bullets in this industry. There's nothing that you're going to flip a switch on and it's going to totally change your business overnight. But all of this stuff takes time to see results. But the only way that people are going to see results is if they're executing consistently without fail.
And I think in collecting data of what it says and making sure it makes sense. And that's the other piece to this, is that you don't feel like it worked because and I will correct a little bit, 3 months may be too short. So I do lean towards 6 or 12 months before you adapt and change. But that's with data. You're getting a lot of quotes from me. I often say data over dopamine, and that goes both ways. Hits of it and lack of it. And so we tend to make in the home care industry just be swayed by the environment of a happy client or a angry client, or a happy caregiver, angry caregiver, or the fact that our scheduler just said they quit with no notice. Whatever these things are, those are hitting on your dopamine or taking from it. They're taking away your joy and happiness. And we make a decision to suddenly just completely overhaul something because of that, when really we need to stick to what we had decided for at least a certain period of time, 6 months, and track the record of how well it's working. And this gets into the weeds of the minutia of like where you're advertising for caregivers and recruiting, or how you are approaching your referral providers and the tracking you do for that. So data over dopamine is a really big thing that I see as another problem. You didn't ask me for two, but underrated is using data to make decisions.
I 100% am on board with what you've just described. And I think one of the things that really stands out to me about you and your practice, but this comes through in the book, 24/7 Solution. I don't know what, the first 50 pages or so are devoted to your emotional maturity, your emotional intelligence, and being able to be kind of the steady rock in your business. And that's the foundation. And then it's what are all the systems that we're going to build on top of you, an emotionally mature owner who's able to not be reactive and blow up when stuff goes badly, and have systems to be able to address when things don't go the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, exactly. I think that should be number one underrated is that evolution of the owner becoming a self-leader of themselves day in and day out. Something that surprised me about the book, this just makes me want to go down this path for a second, is how popular the thermostat over thermometer concept was. That's not mine. It's something I heard. I won't claim it. But I think what people pulled from that is just how relatable it is because of the sense of urgency that home care brings. And it's not a false sense of urgency. It's real. You have a no-call, no-show, suddenly, I think the hard part of people who haven't been in home care, they don't understand about a no-call, no-show or a call-out is like, if you ran a retail store or a fast food, let's use fast food. The person who's going to check out customers can go over to the fryer and make some fries if the fryer person called out, as an example. Yep. You can't do that with home care. The caregiver next door is not next door because they're probably the next nearest caregiver is at least 5 minutes or 10 minutes away, and they can't go from one person's kitchen to the next. So there is a true sense of urgency, not a false sense of urgency. And you have to just have an awareness and a good relationship with that and contingency plans to do that. And you can't do that if you're always reacting versus responding. I'm just throwing lots of quips at you. So
yeah, there's a matrix that I've used when prioritizing what kinds of problems to solve and when. And it's on one axis is urgent, and on one axis is important. And when my wife and I first got married, I was doing catering at Panera Bread. And every part of that job was urgent, and almost no part of that job was important. I remember sending a text message. I'd gotten a last-minute box lunch order, and it was like, I don't know, 80 box lunches or whatever that I had to run out to this manufacturing facility. And we were out of mayonnaise packets. And the stress and anxiety that I felt as like a 22-year-old trying to figure out how to have mayonnaise packets. I ended up going to Jimmy John's across the street and begging them for mayonnaise packets, and they gave me mayonnaise packets. It was all fine. And meanwhile, my wife her first job out of her master's degree in social work was at a domestic violence agency. And so it was so funny to us as young married people, young in our career, understand how to take the urgency, the importance, all that kind of stuff in stride. But I say all that to say, it is, I think a lot of roles have urgency, but the thing is not that important. The crazy thing about home care is it is maximum urgency. This last minute call out is making everybody miserable and stressed and unhappy. But it is also so important because this is not just like a convenience thing. This is a safety thing. And
Right.
this is a health thing. And this is a trust thing. And there's, I think the emotional maturity and the kind of groundedness you have to be able to ride the waves of that is really, I think something that I see from afar, but that you can really only experience if you've been a practitioner in this space.
Yeah, and to go back to the thermostat versus thermometer, the thermostat, I talk about it, it's got two degrees on it. It's got what the temperature is and what the temperature you want it to be. And I think often owners forget to pay attention to what the temperature is. Owners and operators, people who, not the scheduler, not the person trying to hire who had 5 planned for orientation and training and only 1 showed up and can't reach the other ones. You have to, as the owner and operator, you have to recognize the temperature that is in the room and then try to raise or lower it to the temperature it needs to be amidst the important and urgent situation you're facing. And that's hard. I'm not going to pretend like it's easy. It is not easy.
And again, in the book, 24/7 Solution, you can get access to a whole bunch of different templates and systems and stuff that are going to provide backups to those sorts of things and provide some proactive planning that can lessen the impact of those sorts of things. But at the end of the day, this is still home care. Right. And this is still a business where it's a lot of people and there's a lot of moving parts, and it's like part logistics and part human resources. And, and so if you don't have the foundation of this emotional groundedness, it's going to be all the systems in the world are not going to be the thing that saves your business.
Well said.
We've talked about a couple of big mistakes that you made. Thanks again for sharing with us those things. What is a little mistake that you see home care owners making all the time that if they quit, it'd make their lives or their businesses like 10 times better?
I'm going to throw you a curveball. Can I tell you another big mistake that I would like to share before we do that?
Yeah, great.
So this one is later on in my career. So at this point, I'm overseeing operations. It's the first location we've acquired that I am the face of the company and the operator. And we had a special event we did for seniors where bottom line, we helped the community support seniors in need with Christmas gifts. And word has spread, and I'm not going to shy away from the market I was in. I was in a suburb of Nashville, right next door, and word had spread, and I received a phone call from the local news. And the local news of a Nashville market is big deal. It's a big news network. It's a metro area versus a small town like where I grew up.
Sure.
So that scared me. I got the phone call. It's me. I was so stage fright, scared, uncomfortable that I immediately basically turned it over to someone else. I was in a franchise, so I gave it to another franchisee to handle. And I thought I had done the right thing because I wasn't prepared to be on the news. That was not, I was uncomfortable. What?
Yeah.
Wasn't expecting it. Didn't even know that was a thing. So here's the lesson I learned. At that time, I had the owner was mentoring me and had been for years at that point. He stated he was very disappointed at the fact that I passed on a wonderful PR opportunity for our business to speak to the good we were doing, the hard work we were doing behind the scenes, and also get press, right? And make our business name known. And his comment was, "You thought like a manager and not like an owner." From that point forward, I was like, I'll never think like a manager again. This doesn't feel good. And I see everything I did wrong about that and the lost opportunity I had to kind of promote the good that we were doing, all because I was nervous to be behind a camera, whatever that would look like. So I wanted to share that because I think it's important. You talk about little mistakes that owners might be making. I don't know if that's happening in anybody's world right now. That's a mistake that sticks out to me. And I think the reason I want to bring it up is that I do see owners tend to think like managers and not like owners. And I think that's because, and I did too, right? I'm coming from experience when I say that. I think it's because of different factors. Owners did not pursue home care ownership because they wanted to be an entrepreneur necessarily. They did it because they believed in the service that we do and maybe had a personal experience with a family member where it wasn't as great of an experience. I have that in my background. Maybe it was because they didn't know it even existed. I'm not sure everybody's story, but I think they unfortunately enter it with a manager background or mindset or reference point, not an entrepreneur, not owner mindset. And so I think that's a little mistake that owners don't take the time to recognize how to look at their business like an entrepreneur, not as a manager. And what that can mean a lot of different things. So I'll let the listeners decide which angle they want to take it, how that lands for them. But I think that's one thing. So I wanted to circle back to that and admit to that mistake I made that I never made again. I do have another thought on a smaller mistake within the industry, but I want to give you a chance to share thoughts.
Yeah, let me just tag that. I've been fortunate to work with quite a few folks in the real estate world, and the shorthand we would use to see who was really growing their business in a significant way versus folks who, maybe it was sometimes it's a hobby, sometimes it's just kind of an extra little source of income, sometimes it's their full-time gig, but it's not really something that they've got strategy and thinking behind, is we would use the shorthand of, is this person self-employed or are they a business owner? And I think there's so many people who think about this as a job that they do and their boss is themselves. And they don't have a boss, whatever. And I think it's really easy for stuff to start slipping when that happens. And I think there's a big difference when you look at systems and then when you look at the corresponding results of who's self-employed and who's a business owner.
Right. I love that. Self-employed versus a business owner. So this one's just, I'll admit, a pet peeve of mine. And I continue to hear it, so I continue to push against it. A lot of home care owners do not seize the opportunity within their existing caregiver pool of potential of promoting from within. And I often tell clients when I do have the chance to correct them, at least correct them in the way that I believe they can still make their own choices, is that I wouldn't be here talking to them today if it weren't for somebody not thinking that way. Meaning I was promoted from within. I was smoking cigarettes out of side of a fancy facility, making mistakes as a caregiver, and still given a chance to come into the office. And I think there's an incredible pool of caregivers that could be promoted that are just being looked over. And some of them are caregivers who worked a professional life and now became caregivers because their season of life changed. And now their season of life can change again, and they want to go back into the professional world, and they fell in love with your company, and you're not looking at them. So that's one example. You don't have to look at a 20-year-old. But the big key about that, if you do want to work with caregivers and promote them from within, is you can't do it. You can't do baptism by fire. You have to mentor and lead and train and prepare them and do some heavy lifting on the front end. But I strongly believe it is so worth it. I tell a story in my book that, and I might mess up the numbers. I need to pull out the book to see the facts, because I did make sure I did due diligence with the facts then. But I think it was, we had met in our first location around $500,000 a month in revenue, I believe. And it was a very high mark to hit. And on stage, we took everyone that we could. Skeleton crew was back maintaining the office to receive the award from the franchisor. And on stage, there were, I think, 14 people, and 13 of them I had interviewed and hired as a caregiver. They were caregivers during my time that I had interviewed and hired, and that later were promoted within. The only one that wasn't had been there before I was there. And I think that I'm proud of that, and I'm getting a little long-winded here, but I think it's the culture that I was encouraged to be thinking as I'm interviewing people of potential that they could have in the office, but also to be good caregivers. But nonetheless, I think the other point you take away from this is that we grew to be a $500,000 a month revenue back when rates were, $17, $19 an hour. So I don't know the hours back then, but impressive results. All caregivers except for, and the other one was a caregiver. I just didn't hire her. She was a caregiver before me. So all of them made that happen, and they were caregivers first.
That's really special culture. I'll also note there that so many owners I talk to, things are already on fire. And so the infrastructure isn't in place to be supportive of somebody who's got the right personality and character and experience to be successful in the role, but doesn't have they've got all the soft skills, but they don't have all the hard skills that they need. And there's not enough runway. There's not enough space for that person to learn and get up to speed, because what they need is a fix right now, today. And so I think a piece of this is like, if somebody wants to bring in caregivers and have a career path for those individuals, there's some other stuff that has to be true about the business in order for it to be a place where that kind of initiative can be successful.
So I love what you said. I'm going to push back against it a little bit.
Good.
And I think I understand what you're saying, and I'm not failing to see what the temperature of the room is when I say this. So back to the thermostat analogy. A couple things come to mind. The first thing that comes to mind is that I recently heard a quote. I've heard this in different ways. I recently heard it as someone saying, I don't have 30 minutes to meditate a day. And the advice back to them was, okay, then you need 3 hours. If you don't have 30 minutes to meditate a day, you need 3 hours to meditate every day. You got some work to do.
Yeah.
So that's one. And then the second is there's a story about a pope, similar concept, saying that if he didn't feel like he had time to pray, he made 5 hours time to pray instead of the typical routine. So I think that's where we're at when you say the temperature of the room is it's on fire. And then I want to push back with the words you shared, which is from before. They're self-employed or they business owners. Self-employed people will say it's on fire. I never will have time to get to that infrastructure. A business owner says, I'd be darned if I don't get this infrastructure in place so that I'm never on fire again. Or if I am, I put it out pretty darn quickly. So that's where my mind goes. I think it's a matter of a mentality that they can't do it. I got to share this little tidbit. I was listening to Martha Beck, which I actually had never heard of until today. And she was on a podcast, and she was speaking about, she referenced this study that people with depression went through a study, and there was 4 groups. There was a control group, there was a group that did medications, there was a group that did therapy, and then there was a group that all they had to do, I need to get my notes, all they had to do was change the words between I have to or I have to I get to, basically. That's not the direct quote, but that's what I took from it. Or I choose to do this versus I've got to do this. And it showed that the people who came out of their depressive states were the people who changed and reframed their words and thoughts. So I think that was just such a powerful to hear that 4 groups in this study, and the ones who reframed their words is the ones who came the most quickly out of their depressive state. And I think that's what we're facing with owners, and that back to self-employed versus business owner. A business owner is going to say, I get to, and they see where it gets them. They're not blinded by the present, and they can see the future. And a self-employed is, and I have to. Like, I have to respond to this.
Yeah, there's so much research around gratitude and the impact that has on somebody's mental health and well-being and stuff. And I think that's such a great takeaway from all of this is like, man, isn't it cool that this is a job? That's something I've taken from you, is that you didn't know that you could get paid to be all the things that a caregiver is for a client in that stage of life. And for the owners, every single owner I talk to, almost without exception, has gotten into the business because of a personal experience they had with aging and end-of-life care and all that kind of stuff. And they wanted to be able to provide that kind of experience to other people. And isn't it amazing that, put aside all of the logistical challenges and all the stress and headache that comes with this business, isn't it amazing that this is a type of business that you can have where the service that you provide and the thing that drives your livelihood is taking care of people in a really important and pivotal and vulnerable place in their lives?
Yeah, it's so grounding, but I want to play devil's advocate and say that I've been in the place where I couldn't connect back to that anymore. Like, I've been in the place when with building these businesses where that just didn't matter. I didn't care. You can say that all day long, but I don't remember the old me that thought that way. And so there might be some owners listening to this that are there, and we almost sold the first acquisition we had done because I was ready to throw in the towel. And thankfully, I had a series of things happen. I won't go into that right now, but I think if that's the case for anybody listening to this, that David's lovely words were just not whatever is what your mind was thinking. Whatever, David, you don't understand. I would challenge you. I think you need to find a different why. And I talk about that in my book, that maybe your why was that, wow, this is something you can do and get paid for and grow a business in. What an incredible thing. And we help people. That why, it may not be the why of today. And I had to change mine over time. Mine became, at one point, it was because I was hearing so many poor experiences of competitors, people who were hiring people at job fairs on the spot, getting them put into a client the next day, which scares me still today that there's maybe some people out there doing that versus doing the vetting and training, that at least a bare minimum of having them come and do some orientation and training in their office before going to a client. On top of that, clients being telling me experience about providers using what we said earlier, being right versus making right, when caregivers would steal or do inappropriate things. And so my why became, well, I don't want another senior to have that experience. We don't do that. We have higher standards than that. And these people want to stay home. If they have one bad experience with a provider, they might make the decision to move mom, and that may not be the best thing for mom. So my why changed to that. And then last thing I'll rattle on, later it became for me to be motivated to empower leaders that worked underneath me to want to do and have that same impact, because I could only have so much reach myself. So your why can shift. And I think I would just challenge, if you can't relate to the why that you just said, David, try to find what it is today. Don't gaslight yourself and trying to still say, but it's such a good service. I mean, if you can't relate to that and it's not resonating, you're never going to get the other stuff in line that you need to build a flourishing business.
I love it. This has been so good. We've talked about a lot of mistakes. You give us 3 mistakes that you've made, which is, I think I owe you like lunch or something as a result of that. 3 for the price of 1. But I always like to end these things on a high note. And so what's your win of the week? What's something that's happened lately that you're really proud of?
I love that question. We are a part of a younger business. The business that I started didn't start until 2021. And it's pretty exciting to think how quickly we've grown, the team that we've developed here to help home care business owners. So with being a younger business, I would just simply promise to clients, and promise I want to use that word carefully because I can't guarantee anything, but we would encourage our clients that with putting in place the things that we advise, your business will grow by 20%. That was our conservative belief. And that comes from me doing acquisitions and just seeing the work that we would do before even starting day one as the owners with the previous owners, and seeing the turnaround that would happen even before we took over ownership. So I had good confidence in that. But we tend to do, our client terms are typically 12 months. And so we're still collecting data, and it's still very young data. But we learned this week, and within the past week and a half, that our data is trending that half of our clients are growing by 60% or more in the first 6 months. So I'm proud of that. And I love data. So I have to share that because I'm excited, and I just can't help but share that because it's actually what I believed when I started this business that I could do to influence owners. I was still nervous about because it wasn't me doing the work. I was empowering owners to do it within their own businesses. So to start to see the history, the trends mature, and it be true that we're trending in that way is pretty exciting. And I think it's key to point out that we do sustainable growth, right? Our work is not on the marketing only. It's on how to respond to the demands and operational development that allows you to grow. And so I think what one last thing I'll say is that I'm hearing a lot more from clients that when they talk about me, and sorry, I'm really getting excited here, but when they talk about me and they've introduced me to other clients, we've had meetings with their fellow franchisees, and they'll say that they do their business has grown and they're having more fun. And I just love that.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it nice when the data and the dopamine line up
Yes.
so that you get both?
Yes, exactly.
Well, Emily, that's super exciting. You had not shared that with me before, and that's just, I think great validation of all the work that you've done, from the book to your consulting practice to all the stuff you're doing to grow your team. So congrats on all that success. If people want to find you, what are the best ways to follow what you're doing and start to learn a little bit more about your company and you and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So LinkedIn is a really good place to go, just Emily Isbell. And our company website is EIANDCOMPANY. So that's eiandcompany.com. And then you can find my book on most platforms, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you'd like. It's called The 24/7 Solution, Proven Strategies for Home Care Business Leaders. Fun fact, there is somebody who is, I don't know what, plagiarized. And so there's another book called that on Amazon. It's very obviously a fake, so just watch out for the one and look for the one that has multiple reviews on the book. That's mine.
Perfect. We'll link all of those things in the show notes as well, so that it'll be easy to find. Emily, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I had a blast. I learned a lot about all the different kinds of things that you've done throughout your career. And so we'll have to have you back on to unspool some of those threads that we started and we're like, we don't nearly have enough time for this. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. It was fun.
This was fun. On behalf of the team here at Zengage, thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. Leave us a rating while you're there. It helps other people find the show. If you have comments on the show, drop me a line, david@zengage.com. Would love to hear from you, chat with you there.